Greg Stanford opened the meeting with a tight smile and a scripted statement about mutual understanding and moving forward as neighbors. Marcus sat near the front, arms crossed, listening. When Greg asked if anyone wanted to speak, Marcus didn't wait. He stood up and walked the microphone. "I've already said my piece at the HOA meeting," he began, voice steady. "But I didn't realize how many folks didn't hear it. I was stopped outside my own home by police who were called by someone in this community. That's a fact. What I didn't say before, what I haven't told anybody, is this wasn't the first time something like that's happened to me." He paused, his hands lightly gripping the sides of the podium. 5 years ago, I was working on a site out in Trenton, supervising a crew for a new development. I left to grab lunch, came back, and found 2 sheriff's deputies waiting by my truck. Someone had reported a suspicious man walking near the site. I showed them my badge, my contract, everything. They still ran my name, still searched my truck. He looked up, scanning the room. Back then, I let it go, told myself it was just a misunderstanding, a fluke. But it wasn't. It's a pattern. There were murmurs in the crowd now, some nods, some stiff shoulders. I'm not here asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm asking you to pay attention. I'm asking you to think before you make assumptions, because when you get it wrong, the damage doesn't vanish, it lingers. He stopped, took a breath. If this community wants to move forward, we've got to stop pretending these things don't happen here. They do. He stepped away from the mic. As he sat, a few claps broke out, tentative at first, then stronger. Not everyone applauded, but enough did to let him know it mattered. Then a hand shot up in the third row. "Excuse me," a voice said. "I have something to say." The crowd turned. It was a man in his mid-50s, thinning hair, work boots, plain gray shirt. Marcus squinted. Something about his face looked familiar. The man walked at the front, ignoring the microphone. "Name's Rick Holloman. I used to be a foreman for Meyer and Sloan Construction a long time ago. You might not remember me, but we worked one job together. Oh, maybe 17 years back out in Angleton. You were just starting out, subcontractor back then." Marcus blinked. He did remember, barely. "I was a jerk to you," Rick said, nodding. "I didn't let you use the main trailer. Made you and your crew sit out in the sun while everyone else ate inside. I never told you why." He looked at the crowd now. "I told myself it was just a rule. Separate crews, separate spaces. But truth is, I didn't want you in that room. Didn't want to explain to the guys why we had a black contractor at the table." Gasps. A few people looked away. "I'm not proud of that," Rick said. "But hearing you speak tonight made me think about that job and all the ones after. I'm sorry, man. I should have treated you like a professional, like an equal." Marcus stared at him. Didn't say a word. He just nodded. That moment landed harder than any speech. Rick walked back to his seat without fanfare. The silence in the room now felt different, heavier, realer. But as Marcus processed that unexpected apology, a text from Angela would remind him this fight wasn't just public. It was about protecting his own family. The message from Angela came just as Marcus was pulling out of the clubhouse parking lot. "Call me when you can. Something happened at school." His heart dropped. He didn't waste time texting back, just hid her name in his contacts. She picked up on the first ring. "It's Zoe," she said. "Someone slipped a note into her locker today." Marcus's throat went dry. "What kind of note?" "Nothing graphic, but it was ugly. Said your daddy's just another loudmouth trying to play the victim." And it ended with, "Tell him to be careful where he parks next time." Silence hung between them, not because they had nothing to say, but because they both knew what this was. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. They were coming for his daughter now. "She's okay?" he asked. "She's shaken," Angela said. "She held it together at school, but she broke down when she got home." Marcus pulled over to the shoulder and let his forehead rest against the steering wheel. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles hurt. "I'll be home in 10, he said. Zoe was curled up on the couch when he walked through the door. Her eyes were puffy, but she sat up when she saw him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to make it worse." "Baby girl," he said, sitting beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, letting her lean against him. She sniffed once. "I don't want to move," she said, "but I don't feel safe here anymore." Marcus swallowed hard. He'd heard those same words from a cousin once after a cross had been burned on their lawn when they were kids. Back then, Marcus didn't understand how someone could fear a street just because they'd been hurt on it. Now he knew that he stayed there with her until she fell asleep. Later that night, after putting Zoe to bed, Marcus stood in the garage alone. The place smelled faintly of motor oil and damp concrete. He stared at the tool rack, the half-finished cedar planter box he'd been building last month but never finished. He didn't feel anger, not even fear. He felt exhausted. Back when he was coming up in construction, he used to drive an old Ford with no AC and a busted window crank. There were days he couldn't afford gas to get to two sites in one day, so he'd park in the middle and jog the rest of the way. He did that for years, quietly, without fanfare. No one questioned him then. Not because they respected him, but because they barely noticed him. Now he had the house, the business, the family, the life he'd built from scratch, and suddenly everyone had something to say. He remembered a time in Humble, Texas in the early 2000s when he was subcontracting for a developer who wouldn't let him on the actual work site unless he entered the back service road every day, rain or shine. No matter that he was doing the same labor as everyone else, just quieter. He remembered it all, and suddenly he was tired of being quiet. The next morning, he emailed KPRC2 and told them he wanted a second interview. But this time, not in his living room. He wanted to speak in front of his own crew on a job site with his name on the trailer. Later that week, the reporter came out to a project just breaking ground on the north side of town. Marcus stood in front of a half-poured foundation with four of his guys behind him, Latino, black, white, all in hard hats and boots, staring straight into the camera. "I've worked 30 years in this city," Marcus said into the mic. "I've poured foundations, framed houses, repaired roofs in 100-degree heat. I've earned where I live." He paused. But apparently, for some people, that's still not enough. The video aired that night. It didn't go viral, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. And more than a few people noticed. Angela got a call from a local pastor asking if Marcus would speak at a youth leadership program. Zoe's school council requested a meeting to discuss new strategies for student safety and inclusion. It wasn't revolution, but it was movement. Still, Marcus knew words only went so far, especially when he learned what the officers from that night were doing now. Marcus was in the middle of reviewing blueprints when his phone rang again. This time, it was a number he recognized but hadn't expected. Captain Ron Aldrich, Maplewood PD. Marcus stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Mr. Thompson." The voice came steady, official. "I'm calling to ask if we could meet in person at your convenience." Marcus didn't respond right away. "Mind telling me why?" "I believe we owe you a direct conversation regarding the officers involved that evening and the handling of the situation." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Are you offering an apology or trying to make this go away?" A pause. "I'm offering a chance to talk face to face." "That's all." Marcus agreed, reluctantly. They met the next afternoon at a coffee shop in Brookfield, neutral ground halfway between Marcus's current job site and the station. Marcus arrived in his usual work clothes. Captain Aldrich wore plain clothes, too, khakis buttoned down, sleeves rolled up like he was trying to look casual, but Marcus saw through it. They shook hands, barely. "I've reviewed the footage," Aldrich began after they Saturday multiple times. Marcus stayed quiet. "I'll be frank. Officer Collins and his partner violated our department's guidelines on handling non-criminal encounters. There were signs of bias and procedural lapses." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of saying they messed up?" "Yes," Aldrich admitted. "They did, and it's being addressed. They've been temporarily reassigned while we finish the internal review." "Not on patrol?" Marcus scoffed. "So they're still getting paid?" Aldrich didn't argue. Marcus leaned forward. "You know what gets me? If my daughter hadn't filmed it. If that footage didn't exist, you'd be treating me like I made it all up." Aldrich nodded slightly. "I understand how it looks." "No," Marcus snapped. "You don't. You understand how it plays out when someone records it. That's different. They sat in silence for a moment. Listen, Aldrich said, voice lowering. This city is changing fast, and we got officers who weren't trained to see those changes as a good thing. I'm not excusing it. I'm saying we got work to do. Marcus stared at him, searching for sincerity. Then start with real consequences, he said. Because if all they get is desk duty, nothing changes. Aldrich nodded again. Understood. The meeting ended cordially, but it didn't sit right with Marcus. It felt like a PR move, a way to say, look, we tried. He walked out of that cafe feeling more like a box checked than a citizen respected. That night, Angela was scrolling on her tablet when her face went still. Ray, she said, turning the screen toward him. There on a local police appreciation page was a photo of Officer Collins smiling, arms crossed, standing with a neighborhood group holding signs that read, "We back the badge." The post praised his service and integrity. Marcus read the caption twice. He's a guest speaker now, he muttered. Angela's lips tightened. They didn't sideline him, they rebranded him. Marcus shook his head, standing up. I'm not letting this slide. He called a lawyer the next morning. Not to sue, not yet, but to understand what options he had if disciplinary action didn't stick. Maybe public pressure would. Marcus also reached out to a community advocacy group based in Baytown. He'd spoken with one of their leaders, Delora Vines, after the news segment aired. She was sharp, organized, and had receipts for everything. They met 2 days later at a small civic center. Delora came armed with folders, printouts, and a tablet loaded with local PD statistics. Look, she said, I'm not here to push you into anything, but if you're serious about this, we need to be strategic. Letters to the city council, public complaint hearings, civilian oversight meetings. We build pressure in every room they walk into. Marcus nodded slowly. I've never done anything like this before. You didn't have to, Delora said. But now they made it your fight too. He took the package she offered him and thumbed through the documentation. It was dense but organized. Names, timelines, case histories. Marcus wasn't looking for revenge. He wanted accountability. Not just for himself, but for Zoe, for his crew, for the younger guys in the trade who'd faced the same roadblocks without ever knowing what to call them. But as the heat started rising, so did the resistance. One quiet warning from a familiar voice would make him question just how far he should go. Marcus didn't expect to hear from Alfred Boone, not after all these years. They worked together back in the early 2000s, two contractors trying to break through a market that didn't exactly welcome them. Alfred had been older, rougher around the edges, but smart. He knew how to navigate things quietly, how to speak in code around certain inspectors, how to charm city officials without begging for permission. So, when Alfred's name popped up on his caller ID that Friday afternoon, Marcus was surprised. Ray, Alfred said without much preamble. Saw your interview. Been watching everything. Appreciate it. Marcus replied, I admire what you're doing. Alfred said, but I gotta ask, how far you plan to take this? Marcus didn't answer right away. Far enough that they don't forget my name the next time they're about to block someone else's gate. There was a long pause on the line. I get it, Alfred said finally. I do, but watch your back. You're rattling people who don't like being called out, and this city has a short memory but a long temper. Marcus stayed quiet. Just think before you burn every bridge, Alfred added. Not all of them deserve to stay standing, but some you might need again. Marcus hung up with mixed feelings. Was it a warning, a favor, or just fear disguised as wisdom? Either way, the path forward wasn't getting smoother. That evening, Angela came down the stairs holding her phone. Ray, she said, you need to see this. It was a social media post. Another neighborhood group, private but not private enough. A thread of comments under a blurry picture of Marcus's house. He's always been standoffish. Funny how he never had a problem until he wanted attention. I don't feel safe speaking my mind anymore. And one that made his stomach turn. It's people like him who ruin good neighborhoods. Marcus read them all, then scrolled back up and read them again. He knew some of the names. People who waved at him in passing, smiled at the grocery store, nodded politely at meetings. People who didn't even bother hiding their disdain anymore. Angela lowered her voice. I think we need to talk about leaving. Marcus looked at her. Leave the house? He asked. She nodded. Just a few weeks. Maybe go see your sister in Waco. Give things time to cool down. Marcus shook his head slowly. They don't get to push us out of what we built. Ray, I'm not talking about surrendering. I'm talking about keeping our daughter safe. He clenched his jaw. I get that, he said. But if we disappear now, they win. The ones who sent that note. The ones who think I'm just another noise to ignore. Angela sighed. I know. I don't want this to eat you alive. He didn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m., he sat in the garage again, staring at the half-built cedar box. Something about the unfinished would reminded him of how open and raw everything still was. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. Another message from Delora Vines. FYI, found a complaint filed against Officer Collins 2 years ago. Similar pattern. Man pulled over in front of his home. No charges, but no follow-up either. Sending you the documents now. Marcus stared at the screen. There was confirmation it wasn't just him. He clicked open the file, read the summary. Different man, different block, same story. The officer didn't recognize him, assumed the worst, escalated, no apology, no record of discipline. Marcus forwarded it to his lawyer, then saved it twice. Enough was enough. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He scheduled a press conference with Delora's help. It wouldn't be flashy, just a statement outside City Hall, but he would name names. He would say plainly what the system refused to admit. Angela stood beside him that day, holding his hand. Zoe watched him back, surrounded by 2 of her friends. Marcus's crew even showed up, still in work shirts, stained and sweaty, ready to back him no matter what. He spoke calmly, firmly, with no anger in his voice. This isn't just about me. It's about patterns. It's about accountability. And it's about what happens when silence is no longer an option. Some clapped. Others stood still, but they were listening now. And as Marcus stepped away from the mic, he knew the fight wasn't over. But what came next would finally begin to shift the story from reaction to action. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood at the front of a high school auditorium in Brookfield, looking out at a group of wide-eyed teenagers. Behind him, a large banner read, Voices of Leadership, Building Integrity from the Ground Up. He wasn't used to this kind of audience. There were no building plans rolled out in front of him, no team waiting on next steps. Just young minds looking for something real. He cleared his throat, adjusted the mic. When I was your age, he began, I thought success meant proving people wrong, working harder, staying quiet when things didn't feel fair. I thought if I kept my head down long enough, I'd earn respect. But respect doesn't always follow hard work. Not when the people watching you already made up their minds. The room was silent. I built my business with callous hands and 4 a.m. starts. I built my home with pride, but I still got stopped at my own gate. Still had to explain myself like I didn't belong. That's not just about race. That's about perception. And when you don't control the narrative, someone else will write it for you. A hand shot up from the third row, a lanky student with a notebook on his lap. Do you think speaking out made it worse? He asked. Like, would it have been easier to just let it go? Marcus didn't hesitate. It might have been easier, but it wouldn't have been right. Silence might protect you today, but it leaves the next person wide open tomorrow. He glanced toward the back of the auditorium where Zoe sat with Angela, listening intently. He smiled. I didn't speak out to be a hero. I did it because my daughter has to live in the world we shape. And if I let them treat me like a stranger in my own driveway, what message does that send her? The applause came slow at first, then grew steady and heartfelt. Afterward, a small group of students came up to him. One young girl with braids and braces told him her brother went through something similar in Brookfield. Another student said his mom was afraid to speak up at her job, but he was going to show her Marcus's interview that IT wasn't a viral moment. It wasn't trending on any app, but it was something better. It was real. Outside the school, Marcus stood near his truck, while Angela handed Zoe a bottle of water. The sun was low, orange against the pavement. You did good, Angela said. Walking up to him, Marcus exhaled. I was nervous. Kids are harder than contractors. She laughed, then turned serious. You know this isn't over, right? There's still going to be resistance. I know, he said, but I'm not in it alone. That night, Marcus finally finished the cedar planter box in the garage. He lined it with fresh soil, planted lavender and sage, and placed it by the front porch. Neighbors walked by the next morning. Some waved. One even stopped to compliment the flowers. Marcus didn't wave back out of habit anymore. He did it with purpose. Because if they were going to see him, they'd see all of him. The builder, the father, the man who stayed. The officers Collins quietly resigned from the department 3 months later. Aldrich was transferred to desk duty indefinitely, pending a new oversight policy. No grand gesture, no dramatic ending, just change, slow, forced, but real. The neighborhood patrol firm didn't get reinstated, and the HOA, well, elections were coming up, and Marcus's name had already been nominated for the board. He hadn't accepted yet, but he was thinking about it. Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken gate is to hold the key yourself. Let this be a reminder. Where you live should never determine how you're treated. What you wear shouldn't change how you're seen. And silence might keep things calm, but it never makes things right. If you made it this far, thank you for hearing Marcus's story. Now ask yourself, would you have spoken up? If this story meant something to you, share it, like it, subscribe. We're telling real stories that challenge the silence, one voice at a time.